So in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about what is the hardest thing in Dan Pena's QLA model. So this is a question that I have received from one of my subscribers, is that what was the hardest thing when you were executing Dan Pena's QLA model? So just a quick introduction. My name is Prithvi Chauhan, and I went to Dan Pena's Castle seminar in the year 2019, December, and I have been to the Castle twice, one for the QLA Quantum Leap Advantage seminar, which costs about £20,000, by the way, and the other one was the QLA Hardcore seminar. And I attended both of these seminars in December 2019. And after that, I went to Dubai and started to execute, and I ended up structuring a business partnership with a $3.5 billion CEO at the age of 29. I was 26 at the time. So at the age of 26, I did that, and I also brought together some of the other very high profile, high powered executives that have 30 years of experience in their respective fields, including a lawyer who advised a $13 billion bank merger, and some of the other top finance professionals who were in CFO positions in $400 million companies, and I managed to get them to be my business partners. And I also managed to negotiate with top law firms and top accounting firms in the world. These are firms that have revenues of billions of dollars, and I was negotiating them in their offices in UAE with their senior partners, some of the top executives in the firm there. I did that as well, and I negotiated with some of the top banks and several healthcare companies which had revenues in excess of $25 million, $120 million, $140 million, $3.5 million, and $10 million. So these are the different transactions that I worked on, and I managed to secure 2 term sheets from bank, one of the largest banks in UAE, to finance 70% of a $10 million transaction. Now, we did not end up closing that transaction, but we managed to secure this term sheet, which was an achievement considering my age and level of experience and the time frame where these things happened. All of these things happened. So I'm going to be talking to you about what was the hardest part, what was the toughest part in executing the business model of Dan Pena, which is Quantum Leap Advantage. And it's a business model to create wealth through buying multi-million dollar businesses using banks' money, which is debt. So what was the most difficult thing about this? And there are several things which are actually very difficult, and these are not difficult in a practical sense. In fact, most of them are not difficult in a practical sense, but they are very difficult emotionally, and I'm going to explain to you what that means. So one of the things that once you learn this business model is that you are executing based on faith, because this is the type of business model that you don't get to hear about in universities, schools, colleges, or even in your family environment. And this is something completely new, and to invest your time, your valuable time, away from family and friends and the things that you could do, you're giving your time based on faith. And that thing, and especially you have no experience and you're doing this for the first time, so a lot of the things that you're doing are based on faith. And that's probably the most challenging part, because you don't actually know whether it will work or not. And this is something that I dealt with quite a lot, is that I was doing meetings and I was meeting people and proposing partnerships that I did not think would turn out to materialize. For example, when I met the CEO of $3.5 billion company, I mean, he was the CEO of one of the largest companies in UAE, and it's a public company. It was owned by the government, and he was the CEO, and he looked like an emperor. And I was a 26-year-old businessman who, entrepreneur who's trying to make something of himself. I didn't go to Harvard, Yale, or Oxford. And this is a man who's in his 60s, so much more experienced than me and so much more accomplished than me, that I sat down in front of him and I was proposing a business partnership with him. So it was, and to give you a perspective, I'm probably the same exact age as his son, probably maybe a couple of years older. But that's, I'm almost as old as his son, and I'm proposing a business partnership, and I'm proposing a partnership in a project that I have in mind. So if you think about it logically, why would he say yes? But he did. And I surprised myself when he said yes. And then the whole thing got validated for me. So there are several steps in the process, and each step, until you execute it effectively, until you get some success at each level, you will not feel grounded. You will not feel comfortable executing the steps. And then once I got that first yes, I kind of cracked the first step, or the first initial step of building the dream team. So once he said yes, I saw, oh, this is possible. And then you execute it, you speak to the next person, and it turns out well. And until you get that yes, you're not comfortable executing the steps. You are hesitant, and you have a lot of anxiety and fear. And more importantly, you are draining, or you are using one of the most valuable resources that you have, which is time, on something that you are not fully sure of. So once he said yes, the rejections afterwards with other people were not so harsh, because it was just a question of numbers game. When all you hear is a no, it's very difficult, because you haven't heard a yes. You don't know if it works or if it not works, and you are wasting your time. But once someone says yes, then you know that some people are going to say no, some people are going to say yes. I just have to keep going. And before you know it, I had my whole team in place, and I couldn't believe it. And then the next step was easier and easier and easier. So the big part, one of the toughest part, is that you haven't done it, and you have to go on faith. You are going on faith, and anything you haven't done, it's typically you're going on faith. It's kind of like jumping in the water, and that's one of the challenging part. The second challenging part is that until you acquire your first $1 million company, until that point, you don't have any income. So you don't have cash flow, and you have to depend on a job or a business that you might have that to pay your bills, your day-to-day bills. And to produce that income, you have to work. So not only that you're working on your current job, you're also building a second project. And both these things together take up all of your time. And you don't have time for your friends, you don't have time for your family, you don't have time for birthdays, festivals. And what starts to happen is that your entire personal ecosystem starts collapsing. And it completely collapses after a year or two, where everybody hates you, because you haven't been to their marriage, you haven't been to their birthdays, you haven't been on New Year's, you haven't been anywhere, and you're not spending time with your mother, maybe your wife, your kids, and people start to resent you because you suddenly have a change of behavior, you have a sudden change of pattern of behavior, or how you spend time with people, and nobody understands, nobody wants to understand what you're going through, and only you know what you're going through, and the types of pressures that you're dealing with, and the types of negotiations you are being part of, and nobody is willing to understand. And you would think that people would be happy for you, but actually they feel a sense of loss of your presence, and they resent you for that. And even if you tell them what you're doing, they will either be envious of you, or they don't want to hear it. and they just want the thing that they were getting from you. And not only them, not only they feeling the loss, you also feel the loss. You feel lonely and there is nobody around to talk, and you're just executing by yourself. So previously you may have a career, a job, or a small business, and you may have some free time that you spend in personal life, things that you like to do. But once you start executing this project, everything in your personal life disappears, and it's all business and business. There is no business and personal life, it's all business. And all the conversations are around money and finance, and you don't have any interpersonal relationships or interpersonal connections, and that is very heavy on your heart, heavy on your spirit, heavy on your mind. And that's another thing that is very challenging, is paying your bills while executing. And to do that, you have to spend all of your time, typically you are spending all of your time doing just business. And that's pretty heavy stuff. And then the third aspect that was the hardest was probably digesting the fact that you are actually doing multi-million-dollar deals. Because the numbers, when they come in front of you, the financial statements and the amount of debt that you would be raising from some of these banks, I mean, it's a pretty scary amount. I remember when I was sitting with a few bankers in one of the fine dine restaurants in Dubai, and I was, on pitching this business that we had found and the price that we negotiated, and I wanted their financing, and they were interested. It was a second or third conversation. So it was the first time we were meeting, and before that we did a couple of Zoom calls and explained the business case. And now they had a confirmatory meeting where they were interested and they wanted to take us out and understand a little more about us. And finally, they came up with a term sheet. But while I was in that meeting, the entire restaurant was shaking. I mean, I was going through anxiety. I felt sick to my stomach. I wanted to puke. I had like weird reactions in my body that I never felt. Kind of like you're doing a stage presentation and your lips start to flutter and your legs start to shake. Like those kinds of reactions I was going through. And it was a very high pressure situations, and you cannot talk to anybody about it. It's just what you're going through, and nobody's even going to believe you that you are doing these big negotiations in your environment, but you are. And it's all a very strange chaos, which is beautiful, and you're living your dream and you're just reaching for the skies. And it's a very fleeting emotion, but it's also very scary and intimidating, and the eyes are on you. And for the first time in your life, or in the first time in my life, other people were dependent on me to perform. Not me depending on a salary or on my family or somebody, but other people depending on me. And that's always a lot of pressure. So you're carrying all this weight and you're executing over a long period of time. So you have sleepless nights, you have the feeling of stomach churning, you have a feeling of what's going to happen, because you're supposed to, in a way, predict and create the future. And you have to deliver what you said. And all of this is very challenging. So again, as I said, was the presentation itself difficult? No. But the emotional aspect, that the undercurrent of the conversation was very, very intense. Because there's just so much chaos happening in your personal life and business life, and so many things that you're managing, that your mind is going all over the place, and this continues for a long period of time. So that's, in essence, what were the most difficult aspects. And that's the type of life that high performers lead. Anybody who has done anything significant in life has lived in a very similar manner for a long period of time. I was listening to an interview of Elon Musk where he said, "I'm not sure whether you want to be me. A lot of people want to be like me, but I don't sure you know what it's like to be me." And because it's hell. But that's what we admire, and that's what we worship about these extraordinary individuals. So that's my take on what was the hardest thing in Dan Pena's QLA model, and doing mergers and acquisitions and acquiring and doing these big multi-million-dollar deals, negotiating these deals, being part of this conversation. So I just wanted to share that, and I'll talk to you soon.